Alright, I'm going to try to record this whole thing in one shot. I have no video production skill or experience. I just need to get this project out there. Here we go again. Human beings are said to be as unique as snowflakes. And the old cliche is true. Of course, snowflakes are all variations of ice crystals formed around a nucleus in the cold air. They're not the only kind of crystal. In complex systems, variations can be infinite. That's great for producing a huge variety of beautiful crystals, but not so great if you've misplaced your keys in a complex system. If each human mind is a unique snowflake, imagine the infinite variety of other minds besides the little ice crystal. How many different materials, shapes, sizes, states of matter, and ways of connecting them exist? How many physical objects could there be? The space of possible minds is much the same, if not at least more interesting. We at least presume we have a rough idea of how human minds are, so to speak. But what of minds that think differently, experience differently, or perhaps not experience at all? Can a mind exist without experience? We shall explore. Or experience only in ways which we cannot comprehend at all? Where do the limits of possibility, nay, of imagination, lie when it comes to sentience, consciousness, and intelligence? Not every possible mode of thinking, reasoning, learning, or being is human like. And of the not human like, some would be hard to even understand. So, what is possible? The Space of Possible Minds, Part 1 Anthropomorphism Trap by Jade. Greetings. Here we begin exploring the space of possible minds. This is part 1 of a video essay series. Imagine a boundless landscape, a vast graph of all the different kinds of minds that could possibly exist. This vast space has many directions to travel in, more than the 2 or 3 dimensions you might be used to thinking in. That is what we are talking about. There's a spectrum of what we call intelligence. It is the ability to learn information or infer patterns. It's the ability to grasp or understand and apply information to make accurate predictions about the future to solve problems. It's the ability to adapt to new situations and produce desired outcomes or achieve goals, whatever those goals might be. Think of a slug, slowly learning to avoid a plant with a sharp scent because eating the plant makes the slug sick. That's a kind of intelligence, albeit a simple one. Now imagine an intelligence so vast it could predict almost anything with near perfect accuracy, an intelligence approaching the omniscience that we would ascribe to God. Whether such a thing is even possible within the bounds of the universe, the idea itself exists. From the simplest minds, barely able to learn at all, to minds of unimaginable power, or even into the strange realm of negative intelligence. Negative intelligence? What could that mean? I'll explore the idea more fully in future, or I'll fail to do so as a more concrete demonstration. As a side note, I should mention that intelligence is subjective, but for the sake of useful discussion, we should try to have a working definition of intelligence. There may be kinds of intelligence we would not recognize as such, despite their practical utility. Such ideas are part of what drove me to create this series. So that's one dimension of our map. But intelligence isn't the only thing that defines a mind. On our map, there are many perpendicular directions to intelligence. That is to say, there are also values, what a mind considers good, important, or desirable, what it aims at. And these values are completely separate from intelligence, and may be infinite in number. A super intelligent AI could predict every move in a chess game, but that doesn't tell it why it should play chess, or whether winning is even a good thing. Those are values, and intelligence alone can't create them. This idea is called orthogonality, the principle that intelligence and values are independent of each other, and that intelligence itself cannot deduce what should be valued. The problem is also named the is-ought distinction, for what cannot tell you what ought to be without a prior ought. For instance, you cannot say you should use an umbrella in the rain without implying you should not get wet. And there are other continua as well, the ability to change your values, to grow in intelligence, the many ways in which you might think, and the very physical structure of a mind. All of these are dimensions on our map, contributing to the vastness of the space of possible minds. Notice I said dimensions, not directions, as each dimension itself adds a number of new possible directions, creating a seriously complicated space. Trying to map such a space would drive even the most skilled cartographer to tears. In this series, I plan to delve into all of this, and more, from the known to the mind-bending. After all, Klingons are not exactly pushing the limits of imagination. Humans have a well established tendency to anthropomorphize, so much that I won't dwell on proving it. I mean, tell me you haven't scolded an electronic device at least once when it malfunctioned. And we anthropomorphize more than just our appliances and our pets. We call time our father, earth or nature our mother. Some say we look like God, and thus him like us. And this trend is all but rampant in media. Sometimes the choice is explained narratively. Star Trek wrote in a common origin for all the intelligent humanoids in the show. Stories like Freyrin explain human like traits in non humans as a result of evolutionary processes like mimicry. But some stories are not deliberate in the way they anthropomorphize non humans, even to their detriment. There are so many examples that I could turn this video into a list of them and lose every viewer to boredom before I was done. Not that a part of me wouldn't want to spend an hour just naming obscure Dungeons and Dragons races. Atomy, Three Green, Ripley, etc. Oftentimes, anthropomorphism is used as a deliberate mirror, something to get the audience to examine themselves by displaying human traits in unexpected places. It allows the audience to examine specific aspects of the human condition from a detached and emotionally safe distance. These mirrors can be emotional, regarding human feelings, cognitive, regarding human thought processes, or motivational, regarding human wants and desires. This has its uses, especially when done well. A thoughtful example I am particular to is the hand-shaped heptapods from Arrival, demonstrating the importance of establishing communication while exploring how a different mind might experience the world itself in a different way from us. But it is not always done well. In fact, done poorly, as it often is, it can take certain things away from the piece of media. More importantly, while trying to show that which is alien, it can end up being just stand ins for human cultures, ideas, or even in some bad examples, human peoples. Just look at the Vulcans, representing a form of Stoicism, or the scientist Solarians, or the Covenant, a religious autocracy and doomsday cult that could easily be human. So, why does this matter? Why is it a problem that so many alien minds are just reflections of ourselves? In the next part, we'll explore how this anthropocentrism limits our understanding of the true diversity of minds and reinforces our potentially harmful cognitive biases. Excuse me. In order to understand why other minds are not as likely to be similar to ours as we would assume prima facie, or on the face of it, we should briefly examine how our minds came to be the way they are. The evolutionary path which wound its way to Homo sapiens is long, fraught, and winding. The topic of human evolution, especially in the psychological or cognitive context, is a very complicated subject that is not done justice by brief outlines, and discussion of it could form a video series unto itself. So I may dedicate a future video to an exploration of the topic in my limited capacity. Nonetheless, we are a product of selective pressures, environments, and even our own selves through what is called sexual selection, a subset of natural selection which involves traits which affect attractiveness to mates as well as what constitutes attractive to an extent. Our innate sense for beauty has roots in determining the health of potential mates and hunting or gathering partners. Yet, somehow, I ended up with just dreadful taste in potential mates. Luckily, I still found a really good one. A symmetrical face might indicate good genes. Our sense of natural beauty is similarly rooted in survival. A lush landscape might suggest abundant resources or an easier time surviving. Our sense of symmetry might come from both determining genetic fitness, but also from evaluating the craftsmanship of a stone tool at a glance. Our social proclivities are a result of our tribal crucible, needing to track our own status and determine the trustworthiness of others, even our own trustworthiness, a possible pressure for consciousness. Predicting the behavior of others towards you in a social group is easier if you can model how you are perceived internally. Cooperation and social bonds were essential for survival in small groups. Our sense of uncanniness comes from needing to be able to weed out the not quite right or face the consequences. A subtle difference in behavior might indicate a threat or potential illness, which could threaten survival. Our fear of isolation or darkness are rooted in the extreme dangers those situations once posed to us. Solitude might made us vulnerable to predators, while darkness concealed them. Almost everything about us and the way we act and even feel is a result of yet another problem which evolution, ever creative, had to answer. We're very complex creatures. I could and may dedicate another video to all the various ways of being that we have found. We're adaptable and amazing and varied, but we're more alike than different. Every snowflake is unique, but all snowflakes are formed of water molecules freezing around a dust nucleus in the clouds. None are a grain of sand, formed by the whipping of dust through the wind against silicate rock, or the grinding of rocks in the tides of the ocean. Snowflakes are variations on a single theme. Grains of sand are fundamentally different. If other minds exist, out there or depicted in media, they would not have had the exact same selective pressures as us, not by the odds. Some, maybe, but there would be stark differences. This is the key. This is what anthropomorphism misses. So, if even human minds, shaped by a shared evolutionary history, can be so diverse, imagine the possibilities when we consider minds that evolved under entirely different conditions. In the next part, we'll delve deeper into how this fundamental misunderstanding of evolutionary process pressures leads to the trap of anthropomorphism in media. It is likely that it is evolutionarily adaptive to view the world as being full of agents. After all, that is how we evolved. Incorrectly predicting that something is a dangerous agent is often better than assuming it is safely inanimate. Seeing a predator in the silhouette of a rock, for instance. An agent is a being that makes decisions. A thermostat meets the definition, as it decides whether or not to turn on the heat or the cooling. This tendency, see agency everywhere, likely evolved because it provided an evolutionary advantage. It helps us predict behavior, even if that behavior is ultimately random. It gives us a sense of control in an unpredictable world, which itself can be of use to us. To ascribe agency to an inanimate object or a non agent is to anthropomorphize, though in a very different sense from the mirroring I had mentioned earlier. Still, I think this must be one of the stems of anthropomorphism in general. I really do wish I weren't so subject to this. Sometimes it feels like inanimate objects are around me are judging me. Another might be that we interact with humans so often. It becomes easy to see our traits where they might not exist. This relates to something called theory of mind, our ability to attribute mental states to others. While essential for social interaction, this ability can also lead us to project human like mental states onto non human entities. What do I mean by this? We curse fortune itself for bad luck, as if Lady Fortuna made a decision to harm us. We might say our computer decided to crash. One of my favorite examples is our ability to relate to a character in a third person video game. When gameplay is smooth and the challenge level is right, people often say, I climbed that tower, or I defeated that boss. But if the game feels janky and the difficulty is not well balanced, we may say, my guy won't jump when I need him to, or the stupid character won't attack when I press the button. Notice how the agency is shifting in these examples from player to character. Another example includes that we thank goodness for small miracles, even though goodness is just an idea and only acts through people. But viewing the world this way helps us better understand the patterns of the substrate in which we exist. It helps us make sense of systems that are inherently chaotic, hard to predict, and it helps us regulate our emotions. Importantly, it helps us construct narratives about the world, which is something comforting to us humans. It is somehow less worrying to imagine that the weather had it out for you, or maybe had it in for you, when it rains on your picnic, than to really grasp that the rain came as a result of natural processes in which you were not a significant factor. Being at the center of your world, it feels like things happen to you rather than just happen. And it feels like these things happen to you have some causal link to you. This egocentrism also leads to anthropomorphism, as it places intent into that which cannot have intent. Any anthropomorphism of non agents is magical thinking. Others have explained that term better than I, but in essence, it is to suggest that the causal link between action and event is not physical, or is not scientifically explainable, or is not a direct chain of human actions, or that the mental states, words, and rituals can influence the world through vibes, magic, luck, karma, etc. For instance, thinking a lucky shirt can help your favorite sports team win a game, or more obviously, the belief that magical spells do anything other than induce a mindset in the caster, which isn't exactly nothing. Why bring all this up? Why say it is adaptive to anthropomorphize after saying it is unhelpful or even harmful. Well, even if it can be adaptive to predict the motivational state of, say, a dangerous animal, thinking the hungry lion is angry isn't really accurate. It's a helpful but incorrect heuristic. The hungry lion is not trying to kill you out of anger or spite. It is hungry, or maybe being territorial, which still isn't anger. But you'll probably predict its next move, attacking you correctly anyway. I am a believer in the idea of true enough, as in true enough to go by. But I also believe that there are facts to be found, and the fact of an animal emotion may not match the appearance. This is even more important when trying to gauge the potential emotional state of an unfamiliar entity, or otherwise useful heuristics could lead to untrue beliefs, which could present problems. Unfamiliar and complex situations are the foil of true enough. If you've ever seen a cat puff up, put its ears back, hiss, and swipe at something, a dog or a toddler maybe, you might assume the cat was angry, but it was scared. This display is a defense mechanism, and the emotion seemingly displayed is not the one which the cat is experiencing. We often anthropomorphize the cat's behavior, assuming that it is angry when it is actually scared. Examples like this are pervasive. A human with ill intent might feign friendliness, or any being deceptively displays an emotion other than the one it is experiencing for instrumental reasons. The cat is not choosing to be deceptive. That is simply the behavior that it has when it's scared. A being could make a rational choice to make these feigned displays. Ergo, we might attribute emotions to things that are completely unfeeling. Without a way to directly examine the internal state of a mind, we cannot know. If you have a way to directly examine the internal state of a mind, please do not examine mine. There could even be the case of misinterpreting a friendly display as hostile if our semiotics and those of another group do not mesh well. Then there's the complexity that might emerge from non human emotions. We have a vast number of possible emotions. Though sometimes it is hard for someone to describe how they're feeling other than scared or mad. With enough examination, these emotions can be narrowed down to one of hundreds of possible states. That does not cover all the possible emotions a being can experience. Human beings might be able to get a taste of the full range through altered states of consciousness, but that's beyond the scope of this discussion, and I would have no experience to draw on in that regard. Even with such immense diversity of possible emotions, our emotions are still shaped by our experiences and human evolution. So, a being with an alien selective pressure, imagine a species that perceives and interacts with the world primarily through magnetism, would develop an alien emotion, a state that we can hardly describe for lack of being able to feel it ourselves. They might experience an emotion related to magnetic fields that we can't even conceive of, a feeling of attraction, repulsion, or resonance that is completely alien to us. To save time, I'll list some possible others, but we'll discuss them in depth another time. Different perceptions of time itself, of dimensionality, or even a difference in theory of mind. And it does not end there, for minds do not only result from selective pressures. A mind can be created. Artificial intelligence, for example, might end up experiencing emotions that are entirely different from human emotions, unbound by our biology or evolutionary past, with totally different algorithms and reward functions. The evolutionary advantage of this emotional mirror is based on the practical effects it had for us as creatures on Earth, surrounded by earthly life. This is also the source of the problem. It is hard to understate how dangerous it could be to emotionally mirror a creature or mind and get it wrong. Imagine misinterpreting a predator's playful behavior as aggression, or vice versa. Worse yet, agents could exist which intentionally use our proclivity to emotionally mirror against us. The consequences could be fatal. This happens among humans, but we're at least wired to have intuitions about it. For a non human, our intuitions might not kick in or might fail us. Our intuitions about emotions are based on our experience with humans, and perhaps some animal behavior, and our evolution. So they might be completely unreliable when dealing with alien minds. We see examples of this all the time in media. Characters using expressions of fear to get out of trouble, or other forms of emotional manipulation. AI chatbots seem friendly and helpful, but their behavior is ultimately based on algorithms and not genuine emotions. Indeed, they behave this way as a result of intentional decisions by their developers to make them more engaging and usable products. Dogs may behave lovingly, but the love that they feel must be quantitatively different from the human love, based on slightly different neural patterns and architecture, despite the glaring similarity. Folklore is full of examples of creatures that use emotional manipulation. The Aquizotl, a mythical creature from Aztec mythology, is said to lure its victims with false cries for help, especially those of human infants. Doppelgangers and other nearly ubiquitous trickster figures throughout cultures exploit our emotional vulnerabilities, such as fear, grief, lust, or friendlessness, to manipulate us. All of that is to say nothing of cognitive mirroring, the tendency to assume that other minds think like us, reason like us, and solve problems like us. Of course, the forms of mirroring do often go hand in hand. The anthropomorphic trap of cognitive mirroring is even harder to pin down than the emotional one. It's harder because we have no direct access to the subjective experience of another mind, even another human mind, let alone an alien mind. It is unlikely that consciousness itself feels similar from mind to mind. After all, it feels different to be yourself at various ages, under the effects of various hormones, neurochemicals, and, though I lack any such experience, under certain drugs. If your own self can occupy such varied parts of the space of possible minds, then a brain, or mind, with a different form to yours will experience differently. So much that it might be truly impossible to picture yourself in the place of such a mind accurately. In certain academic circles, the qualitative character of experience, or experience of being, is called qualia. Think, is my red the same as your red? Or, ow, I stubbed my toe. In the former, being colorblind, red green deficient, I can say probably yes. In any event, I have been reliably informed that we do not have access to the qualia of other beings. And this is true. Media occasionally plays with the fantasy trope of switching bodies, like in Freaky Friday or the Scooby Doo movie. But this trope usually portrays consciousness as easily transferable, which is likely a vast oversimplification, especially when it is the case that the brain and the body are intermeshed and interlinked. Further, focusing just on the mind, your experience is inherent to the structure that forms you. Another program cannot run on your machinery. Your hardware may be similar to that of other humans, but it is not exactly the same, even just looking at memory, which is encoded physically. Your wetware is you. Your thoughts, feelings, and experiences are rooted in your physical being. At least, in the case of dissociative identity disorder, each personality is embodied only in one person, and though different, it is still a part of that person and of that brain. Of course, DID is nuanced and complex, and my limited experience with those, or really that one X, bearing the condition is anecdotal, though demonstrative. As such, you cannot experience being anything other than a form of yourself, at least not yet, and not with current technology. The point that I am trying to touch on is that experience is not transferable. There can be ways of processing experience that cannot be experienced by you, as you are. Even if we could perfectly simulate another mind, we wouldn't necessarily experience what that mind experiences. There's the difference between simulating consciousness and actually being conscious. For instance, do you have access to the experience of the characters or people that you meet in your dreams? If and when the answer to that is yes, what makes them not you? Cognition is the process of acquiring knowledge or understanding, data through reasoning, through thought, through experience, or directly through the senses. Naturally, it is very complex. Our senses alone are amazing. And our senses alone are an amazing. Excuse me. Our senses alone are an amazing implicit form of cognition, wherein raw information from the world is processed directly into experience. The sheer volume of sensory input is overwhelming. People with anxiety will know this well. Part of the cognition I mentioned is just in the function of parsing which sensory inputs to filter out or focus on. Imagine trying to focus on every single detail around you at the same time. Every sound, all of the smells, the textures, the temperature, the subtle shifts in light and shadow. You would quickly become overwhelmed, your mind unable to process it all. This constant filtering and prioritization of sensory information is a fundamental aspect of human cognition. But what if your sensory input was fundamentally different? What if you could perceive ultraviolet light, hear sounds outside of the range of normal hearing, human hearing, or sense electromagnetic fields, or even just process all incoming sensory data at the level of focus? These differences in sensory input would lead to fundamentally different ways of perceiving and interacting with the world. A mind that evolved in such an environment would have a completely different cognitive landscape, a different way of understanding and experiencing reality. And now for some examples to demonstrate. A pigeon's homing ability, their ability to navigate to a place that they know well, is predicated on their ability to sense magnetic fields. These fields provide them with a constant three-dimensional map of their environment, allowing them to navigate even over vast distances. They even use a sort of quantum sense, which involves quantum properties, specifically spin, of electrons, which allow them to see magnetic fields in a way that we don't fully understand. Navigation by the use of this sense, and I hope I needn't clarify that humans lack this magnetic sense, comes naturally to them. They do not need to think hard about which way to fly or remember physical routes. It comes to them like walking comes to you, effortlessly, unconsciously. Imagine having to consciously think about every step that you take. That's how we might experience navigating by magnetic fields, if we could even perceive them at all. I, for one, would be walking straight into walls even more than I do already. The existence of such a sense in nature suggests that other similarly wild senses could exist. Indeed, our senses, such as balance and acceleration, which helps us maintain our equilibrium and navigate through space, proprioception, our sense of body position, knowing where our limbs are in space without having to look at them, empathy, our ability to understand and predict the emotional states of others, blood acidity, which our bodies are constantly monitoring, playing a crucial role in regulating our breathing and other physiological processes, the immune input sense, our immune system's constant feedback about the presence of pathogens and other threats, influencing our behavior and even our mood, and others are so innate, internal, and integral to our cognition, some of them we do not have conscious level access to, and they still affect our mood and our behavior. In a way, they can seem as alien to us as a potential alien's ability to feel variations in air pressure as some sort of adaptive mechanism. Achy limbs in some people notwithstanding. Your brain regulates your immune response, your heart rate, your breathing, and your digestion without you ever being able to think about how to do so. And it's a damn good thing, too. These are all essential components of our survival. If you had to focus on them, you might die. The range of possible senses is far greater than we often imagine, which implies that alien minds might experience the world in ways that we would find difficulty in understanding. Let's explore some other examples. Humor is often likened to a sense. What causes you to laugh is, for the most part, beyond your control, and laughter itself is involuntary. Voluntary laughter does not feel the same to you as, or the same to observers. Your sense of humor is rooted very deeply in your mind, and is a sense that serves many purposes, like social bonding, stress relief, and increasing cognitive flexibility. And it's one you can't cognate about directly, not in the moment, and one that is affected by and affects your cognition itself. Like other senses, our sense of humor can be affected by our mood, our environment, and even our cultural background. Humor, being subjective, is like taste. Though you can influence or train your sense of it, in the moment something either pleases you or does not, and you don't choose. State of laughter is like an emotion, but it is also much like your sense of wonder or awe, which, like humor, involves surprise, sudden shifts in perspective, or the unexpected. Or the sympathetic nervous system, which modulates your fight or flight response. Notably, humor, wonder, fight or flight, these all cause physiological changes as well. These senses do also operate on your subconscious, which is an important, even vital, component of your cognition. Your cognition runs so deep that it can make you act without thinking. Except you are thinking, just not in a way that you can bring into consciousness. Yet, your subconscious still does influence your conscious thought, your feelings, and your behaviors. And in the section on values, I'll relate behavior to value. It's all very complex. This level of complexity could take on myriad forms across different sorts of minds, well beyond what we might imagine at first. If we can have a subconscious, then it can exist in other beings too. Some have even toyed with the idea of entirely subconscious beings, with higher than human intelligence, as in blind sight. Such thought is the meat and drink of this discussion. Another important aspect of our cognition is our mirror neurons. These are neural pathways in the brain which activate in response to the actions of another being. Though the extent differs from person to person, in general, when you watch a person close their hand, some of the neurons that you would use to close your own hand activate. Mirror neurons also play an important role in language acquisition, in empathy, in the imitation that children do of adults that allows them to learn how to move around, and in social learning. Theory of mind is hugely important here. When you see another being that you perceive to be in some way worthy, an implicit designation, often based on factors like social status or perceived similarity to ourselves, doing or going through, you experience or do in a minor way. Lacking this, you can even begin to view your future self as unworthy of any consideration, a different person whose troubles are not your own. Some individuals may have differences in their mirror neuron systems, which can affect their ability to empathize and connect, or connect emotionally with others. Lastly, we can touch on moral intuitions. Many are under the impression that morality solely a product of conscious thought and reasoning. Reasoning can help us refine a moral system, hammer out its contradictions, and iron out its inconsistencies, but it is not the source of morality. As I touched on briefly earlier, you cannot determine what should be by what is, not without a prior idea of what should be. Thinking only gets you part of the way, especially when your moral intuitions, in fact, precede and direct your thinking. After all, someone who has not thought extensively about morality will jump to answers to moral dilemmas that come easily and naturally. Placed in the trolley problem situation, you have a lever which controls a switch in a trolley track. The trolley will hit 5 people and kill them unless you pull the lever, switching it onto a track where it will only kill one person. Do you act? Without prior knowledge or any time to think about the decision, I feel confident that many people would simply pull the lever, possibly even before giving it any thought, if the danger was imminent enough. Some argue that taking the action of pulling the lever is committing the act of murder, as it is an act of moral agency, and inaction leaves one's hands clean, as the would be lever puller is not responsible for having tied people to the trolley tracks or for sending a trolley towards people who are trapped. Others might get so flustered that they fail to act, even though they would have chosen to save the 5 people. A very small number might use the lever twice to engage in dual track drifting. Please do not do this. There are many variations on this problem, designed to elicit different moral feelings and responses. It is in thinking about moral dilemmas that we begin to stray from the actions, excuse me, my apologies. It is in thinking about moral dilemmas that we begin to stray from the actions which our moral senses intuits for us. Jonathan Haidt has explored the idea of moral intuition thoroughly, and I would recommend seeking information about it for yourself, for it informs how you think about the world. The outline of the idea is that there is a set of foundational moral intuitions, or pre-principles, which some people care about to greater or lesser extents. These values come to us partly through our culture. For example, different cultures might prioritize different moral foundations, such as individual liberty versus collective well being, and partly through our genes, our parents, and our personal experience. They inform how we think about moral arguments, as well as morality itself. Some ideologies and idea systems are more or less attractive to us because they are not because they are correct, but because they line up with these intuitions. Indeed, this can be a source for confirmation bias. One might seek out information that reinforces their feelings about morality and reject information which runs counter to them. It is important to bear in mind that when you have a disagreement about morality with someone, that their way of thinking about the world might be irreconcilably different to yours. Irreconcilably different to yours. And that does not usually make them wrong or stupid, although they may have principles which are so different that they condone hypocrisy or lying, which can be hard to accept as a valid way of being, especially for some. Further, what seems hypocritical to you may not seem so to others. This is not to say that we should all accept moral relativism, more that we can be more understanding of where others are coming from and why they think that way. To address moral relativism, put plainly, if human flourishing is a value, some moral principles run counter to that. In the space of possible minds, however, where alien goals affect alien cognition, intolerable differences in ways of thinking may arise. With all this talk of human senses and the way humans cognate, we get stray from the main point here. So let's remember that there are many more forms of cognition than the human. When we humans go through an experience, a few things happen. Our brain tries to see if the pattern of sensory inputs is similar in any ways to experiences that we've had before. If it is very like our other experiences, it's probably not very important to remember much about it, unless it's dangerous or something. If it's an entirely new experience with no or almost no similarity, your brain will be very interested in it, for it offers an opportunity to learn something and adapt. It will search deeper to look for similarities to previous patterns. It will store it in memory that is easier to access. It will activate your sympathetic nervous system to wake you up and make you more alert and better able to take in sensory information, looking for more similarities. And you may enjoy the novelty of the experience, as dopamine, the chemical responsible for some happy feelings, also mediates your memory, reinforcing recent patterns of brain activity, including behaviors, which is the cause of muscle memory and of addiction. If the situation has many unexpected elements and novel inputs, you may think about it. You may try to imagine how the situation came to be, backfilling information to create a narrative about what happened. You may try to think about how the situation will affect the future, what implications it has for you or the world, and how important it is. You may wonder if anyone else has gone through the same thing, how they handled it. You may try to reason how you should act in this novel situation, since you may not have a heuristic to go by. Exactly how you respond and how your brain handles it will be based on your individual personality, temperament, and experiences. While I'm not a cognitive neuroscientist, hopefully this simplified overview should be accurate and demonstrative, reflecting the true complexity of the topic. My point here is to explain that there can be minds that do not react to experiences this way. I can imagine a perfectly rational mind, devoid of emotion and only vaguely aware of self, that is never surprised by novel patterns, because it is aware that novel patterns exist. It kind of sounds boring to me, but I'm sure Mr. Stoic Brain thing is fine with the state of affairs. It might always look for logical chains of causality and regression, extrapolating the most likely causes and effects of an event without the sorts of biases that we humans bring to our thought processes, doing so without feelings to cloud its judgment, but storing all memories and searching slowly through everything it knows until it finds every new answer, perhaps missing out on the opportunity to narrowly reinforce certain patterns based on novelty itself. I can also imagine a mind of pure wonder, never able to store information for long, never forming patterns to check its experiences against, simply gazing awestruck at every happenstance that it comes across. Total opposite of the perfectly rational example, a mind that would struggle to make memories or plans. Take if you Take, if you will, the immortal, timeless dragons of the Elder Scrolls. Their language does not use tense, for they do not experience the dimension of time as mortals do. To them, it is as with the Luteces of Bioshock Infinite. Happening, will happen, happened are indistinct. Is, was, and will be are the same thing. They experience existence as a single now. Everything happens at once, with no beginning or end. Their immortality is not perfect, as the Dragonborn can slay them and consume their souls. An end, something which is so difficult for their mind to comprehend, it physically weakens them to be forced to think of it. They know that mortals can die, but they also do not view mortal existence as being complete, as theirs is. So it is less confusing. They do not respect mortals as true beings due to these differences. Their cognition is completely different. Take now the Typhon from Prey. Their experience of the world is so incomprehensibly alien that they cannot view humans as beings, even the ones that are capable of psionically controlling humans' minds directly. Their incomprehensible alienness could be due to a number of factors. They perceive the world through senses that we don't have, leading to a completely different understanding of reality. They use a form of logic that is alien to us, making their thought processes nearly incomprehensible. Their goals and motivations are so different from ours that their actions seem illogical to us. They lack any shared evolutionary history or common ground with humans, making communication and understanding virtually impossible. And what about hive minds, where individual minds are interconnected and share thoughts and experiences? Or minds that exist in environments with different physical laws, or non carbon based life forms, or minds that perceive and interact with more spatial dimensions than we do? The possibilities are vast, and our human centric view of cognition barely scratches the surface. Just as cognition itself can vary dramatically, so too can the goals that drive cognition. Our cognition exists in the first place for a reason. Almost any cognition will be purpose built. Everything made by evolution will have a raison d'etre, if from an evolutionary perspective. As Eliezer Yudkowsky once put it, to paraphrase, all of your organs are there to help you successfully reproduce, and your brain is no different. Of course, we humans are well known to live now outside of the environments in which our minds evolved, and we feel the effects of that. Indeed, we can observe many psychological issues stemming from exactly this fact. Now, instead of our goals coming naturally to us from our internal systems, attraction to another person produces children, caring for children becomes the children grow and enter the community, making the community better becomes the goal. We have to find our own goals. Camus and Nietzsche did much to advance the idea that, if value is not inherent to this world of ours, then we are free and we are responsible to create our own value. At the meta level analysis, which is to say the level that looks at how we analyze values, in the world of man generated values, we may experience a sort of evolution of values, as some claim happened in the past that led to the present state of affairs, where values that produce humans, that produce offspring, that share those values, will be the ones that propagate their values forward, leaving less reproductively viable values in the past. Of course, this idea does not propose that reproductively viable values are necessarily good. They could include values such as cooperation and social harmony, but they could also include values such as those embodied by Genghis Khan. And a reproductively non viable value might include extreme asceticism, which usually is seen as a good thing. Furthermore, the idea is theoretical at best, maybe best related to Richard Dawkins' idea of a meme, an idea which propagates itself and spreads. But in this world, as long as you can really make a goal your own, of course, some goals will simply be easier for humans to adopt due to our proclivities stemming from our biology and our culture. Further, I think some goals are so strange that almost no human mind could actually set them in the position of most important and pursue it. There are a nearly limitless number of goals you could set for yourself. Many choose the goal of living a good life. Many choose being a good person. Others being as comfortable as possible. Others being as happy as can be. We humans are designed to find some goals more appealing than others, to find some values more tasteful, thanks to our evolution. I think humans are also very adaptable. Maximized to an extreme, any value can become its inverse, at least if it is not the terminal value in itself. Goodhart's law, which is a less strict law, sort of like Murphy's law, states that any measure of success at a goal, when made a goal itself, ceases to be an effective goal. So we humans don't typically maximize our goals to an extreme. We have a sense of fairness, which can vary from person to person. A cheater might be able to make a numerical score higher, but we consider this to be illegitimate in many cases. How many of Tom Brady's Super Bowl victories come down to the Faustian deal that he made with the adversary for 20 extra years of youth? One must wonder what he promised in return. Drink up, Tom, there's no water in hell. On a serious note, think about the scoreboard of an online competitive game. The top spot is always belongs to a hacker using superhuman performance. Prey itself has news articles mentioning how the experimental neuromods of the setting obliterated all the old Olympic records. Humans like to relax, too, and to be entertained. We value that, and with good reason, for it is beneficial to our physical and mental health. It's easy to imagine a being with no such internal desire or need for relaxation or enjoyment, one that only derives pleasure from that which helps it reach the next step of its goal. Continuing in our exploration of cognition, humans are possessed of at least two, however intermingling, cognitive tracks. These are labeled by cognitive psychologists and others studying the mind as System 1 and System 2 cognition, for convenience. They were notably described by Daniel Kahneman in the Thinking Fast and Slow. System 1 can be likened to or is snap judgments, intuitions, and emotional reactions, first pass ideas requiring little or no effort or intention. System 2 is any of the slower, more deliberate and deliberative thinking that we do, whether thinking in words or just ideas, trying to come to a conclusion, trying to weigh things, and in essence, construct a narrative in our mind about something. And it requires both effort and attention. They both have their uses. System 1 can often be right about something, guessing in line with higher probability outcomes, and it leads to action when quick reaction is needed. System 2 can overthink, apply incorrect cognitive biases, and come to the wrong conclusions if the way that it gets there feels narratively correct. Of course, System 1 also makes mistakes, misjudges, acts rashly without planning. And System 2, if trained well or working with good information, can form much better plans and ideas about the world. I wonder then, what would an alien System 3 look like? Could some minds have totally different cognitive tracks, or extra ones, or lack anything analogous to our System 1 and 2? Our System 1 evolved to make judgments in the setting of our ancestral environment, which generally led to survival. System 2 is speculated to have developed to help us in the political space of a tribe, to help us win arguments, even if through faulty reasoning, that pushed our preferences or gained status, even through logically unsound means. You know the kind of argument, the kind that school bullies use, the one that sounds right but is founded on a faulty premise. You are ugly, so you must pick your nose. The one doesn't actually follow from the other, but it might sound right to the gaggle of other students now laughing at the victim for being both ugly and a nose picker. At this point, System 1 might be yelling at the crying victim to run from the shame. That aside, what sort of evolutionary pressures could have arisen in other intelligent life to affect their cognition in these ways? Take a hive mind species with less reason to have developed the same sort of system too as us. Maybe their reasoning always ends up aligning with the conventional wisdom, even when it's obviously faulty. Or an asocial species. Maybe their system too only relates to how things affect the being itself, and they can scarce consider impacts on other beings. Lastly, in our exploration of cognition, I would like to touch on personality and temperament, which are essential to any discussion of the topic. A great working model of human personality is the ocean or Big Five model, which places humans on a bell curve of distribution among five dimensions of personality. It's a widely accepted model, though not without its critics, some of whom point to it being oversimplified or culturally biased. Each dimension is relatively independent, with some exceptions, such as slight correlation between conscientiousness and agreeableness, or other minor connections. And the model does not work perfectly across all cultures. Some human cultures lack a good way to measure one dimension, but might have a dimension not covered by the model. Or a culture may lack words that correlate with one of the covered dimensions, and hence the accusations of cultural bias. The dimensions include openness to experience, which includes creativity, or, on the obverse, close mindedness. Conscientiousness, which includes tidiness and something akin to work ethic. Extroversion, which on the flip side is introversion, or extroversion itself is positive emotionality. Agreeableness, or on the other side, aggression or disagreeable. And neuroticism, including self consciousness, negative emotionality, and emotional pain tolerance, or lack thereof. The distribution is measurable, achieved through self answer questionnaires asking about various tendencies and behaviors. The average person will rank in an average position along any given dimension, but only when taken in aggregate. Very high or low scores in a given trait are rare, hence my reference to a bell curve or normal distribution. Most people are varied along each dimension, excuse me, which is something that contributes to the uniqueness of each person. I myself rank in the 97th percentile in neuroticism, for instance, despite otherwise average scores. It is a struggle. One might hope that high negative emotionality would lead to risk aversion, but slightly low conscientiousness and slightly high openness tend to balance this out, and not always for the better. Each of these traits covers an aspect of human behavior. Culture and genetics then lead to culture and genetics then, and to a small extent life experiences and choices, have an impact on where one is positioned, which can change slightly over time. Since within human cultures, the model breaks down for cultures unlike the one that produced it, we can definitely assume that an alien culture, were it to exist, would have totally different axes of personality. I can barely imagine. Maybe a social mimicry dimension, which would modulate how much an individual acts like a member of whatever group they're in. A being with high social mimicry might conform as much as possible to the group, while a being of the same species with low social mimicry might detest being anything like others of its kind to its mind. Such a hypothetical species could have evolved both behavior sets for any number of reasons, like selective pressures or social structures. Imagine the interplay between a social mimic and a social independent. Would independents get annoyed by the social mimics trying to be like them? Would social mimics be confused by the personalities of strong independents? Imagine the average case, wherein most beings of the species are probably somewhat social mimic, but do have independent streaks. Taking it back to humans, our personalities may seem so varied, since two people might be on opposite ends of each trait, but those two are still human. So, in the space of minds, they are still extremely similar, just variations on a human foundation. So, with all of that out of the way, what does cognitive mirroring really look like? Let's try a basic example. Imagine that you're a young child, maybe 6 or 7. You've gained access. Wait for a moment. This will have to be a bit of a intermission in the video. Okay, here we go. A young child of 6 or 7. You've gained access to your older brother's video game console and are playing Call of Duty. You don't know how to get into an online lobby, so you're just playing local multiplayer against bots. You've seen your older brother play the game, so you know that there are other real people that he is playing against with playing with when he plays. Sometimes he yells at them in frustration. The bots that you're playing against are very simple programs with deterministic behaviors based on if-thens routines, with no reasoning involved, or any reasoning that is done is written in ahead of time by people. We used to call that AI, by the way, and in a way, the label is not wrong. Intelligence can be very, very simplistic after all, and those COD bots aren't able to learn. They are actually pretty smart when it comes to COD. You, a naive 6-year-old, assume that you're playing against real people, and they seem quite mean because they keep killing your guy, and it just doesn't feel fair. They act pretty much like the people who play online act, although not when observed closely or by somebody who knows better. That would be cognitive anthropomorphism. I would be comfortable asserting that anyone who's ever shied away from the evil route in a game with a red blue morality system partially did so because of cognitive mirroring. Of course, these systems often rely on simplified representations of good and evil, which can reinforce our anthropomorphizing of the foes, as their evil seems recognizable if played up. When I was young, I destroyed the town of Megaton because I wanted to make a lot of money in the game Fallout 3. When the explosion went off, I was suddenly hit with a wave of guilt. I realized I hadn't stopped to consider the lives of all of those people, and then they were gone. I had done a horrific thing. Those people? Characters at best, and non existences, to be more clear. But I was immersed in the game, so thinking of them as people at that moment came easily to me. Immersion can easily blur the lines between reality and fiction, at least momentarily, in our minds. And it is easy, as creatures with a narrative based cognition, to become immersed in a narrative. I've treated video game characters better than some living beings like ants or tasty farm animals. Why? Because they look like people, or act as close facsimiles of people. Of course, it is easier to anthropomorphize that which looks or acts human like. I've spitefully slain demons in Doom and rebels in FTL because they attributed evil to them. An intelligent being which chooses to be evil deserves its comeuppance. Is a good characterization of my feelings in the past towards representations of fictional characters. It should be pointed just is a good characterization of my feelings in the past towards these representations of fictional characters. It should be pointed out that the demons of doom and similar monsters are made intentionally one sided to promote the disconnect between them and us. And such simplistic evil is very effective in eliciting the right response. Rip and tear until it is done. There are plenty more examples. We often anthropomorphize AI assistants like Siri or Alexa, attributing human like understanding and intentions to their responses, even though they are ultimately based on programs. Modern AI chatbots, with their complex, dynamic, human like responses, are very easy to anthropomorphize. But despite their linguistic intelligence, their brains are very much not structured or built the same way as ours. To liken them to parrots, which use mimicry socially, is even going too far, parrotizing something which is a class all its own. We might feel personally targeted or manipulated by social media algorithms, even though their behavior is ultimately based on statistical models and not conscious intent. We often anthropomorphize natural phenomena, attributing human like motives or intentions to them. For example, we might say that a storm is raging or that nature is trying to teach us a lesson. We frequently anthropomorphize animal behavior, interpreting their actions through a human lens. For example, we might say that a dog is jealous of a new center of attention and affection in its family, or that a cat is plotting our demise, sitting calmly and looking collected, even though their behavior might be driven by different motivations. We sometimes attribute human like qualities to inanimate objects. For example, we might get frustrated with a computer that is being stubborn, or feel affection for a car that we have named. Value is a tricky subject. Other obvious statements include water is wet, the sun is hot, and taxation is legal plunder. Nihilism is the belief that life is without objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value. Existentialism, while acknowledging the apparent meaninglessness of the universe, emphasizes the freedom and responsibility of individuals to create their own meaning. And antinatalist values, antinatalism being a philosophical position which posits that the suffering implicit in biological existence is so bad that procreation should cease, lie in the opposite direction of the continuation of life. If you really valued nothing, you would not do anything at all, ever. all action implies a value, even as simple as to stop this pain or unpleasant feeling, which implies that valuing the cessation of unpleasant feelings, even just an action as simple as scratching an itch to stop the itching. This begs the question, why do AI systems act, even if just to make words? It is because we train them to value predicting words accurately. We train them to have a value, or we program them to. The nihilists in The Big Lebowski are an excellent example of the sort of absurdity implied by the idea of a living nihilist. Having come to the conclusion that there is no inherent meaning to the universe, one might forget that there is at least pain internally to you, and that taking action to at least mitigate that is something that you can value simply because you can. Even without any objective value in the universe, subjective experience can be a source of personal value. So I think it can be said that in the space of possible minds, a nil intelligence is no mind, and a nil value is no mind. A superintelligence with no goal will not act. If it acts, it has a goal. To put it another way, intelligence is intertwined with value and action. Intelligence is effectiveness at pursuing goals, and goals are based on values. Thus, a mind with no values is functionally non existent. Even just thinking is an action, and has a value implicit to it. A mind with no values would not think. This, at least, is not anthropomorphism. But well, what else can we say about value? Let us explore. The space of possible values is nearly as big as the space of possible minds. In fact, both might be infinite, but the set of possible values is subsumed into the set of possible minds, because a given mind, given a set of characteristics, could potentially have any value. So the space of possible values is repeated many times in the space of possible minds, even if not identically. To further the confusion, there is the wrinkle that values shape minds and minds shape values. Now I'm dizzy. I suppose it is worth saying that not every mind can hold every value. A mind may be constrained by its biology, its experiences, and environment in that regard. Indeed, for a single given mind, the set of possible values may be finite, but very, very wide. How wide is that space of possible values? Well, a goal can be a value. Say you have the goal of taking a specific atom somewhere in the Horsehead Nebula and doing something specific with it. Accepting that physical uncertainty might mean that your atom ceases to exist at some point, you can choose to do anything with it. You can try to move it to a specific point in space, try to fuse it into a helium atom, try to chemically attach it to any number of other possible molecules. The list goes on. You can repeat this process for every atom in existence. Attempt to choose some specific goal or chain of events to put them through. You can set a goal like arrange pieces on a Go board in every possible combination, or one combination, or any number of combinations of combinations. And you can make the goal of doing that twice, or any number of times. Possible goals are infinite, and seemingly trivial or meaningless goals are, I must stress, not any more or less meaningless or trivial than goals that seem worthy, like the ones that stand out to humans as making sense. We often have biases towards certain values and judge other values based on these values. But this misses that all values reduce to a simple preference. The answer to why is eventually because. Difficulty or ease do not even make goals more or less meaningful, although something about challenge is attractive to humans. Maximizing or optimizing something, or doing something that is harder or has more physical steps required, or that uses more energy, seems to us to be in some way more worthy, inherently to how we view the world, not from some sense of actual value. Anyone that has built furniture from IKEA understands this. Value itself is subjective, so it cannot be inherent to anything, not even if that thing took effort to make. That is just a preference of ours. Many people are also attracted by altruistic goals, goals that help people and do good. Perhaps they feel the suffering of others and a desire to reduce it, or feel a sense of socially imposed responsibility, or they want the recognition of being good. Moral philosophy has itself has so many permutations that you could limit your thinking about values to just the philosophical exploration of morality and never run out of things to think about. We have goals that come naturally and intuitively for us to evolution We have goals that come naturally and intuitively to us for evolutionary reasons, and we have goals that we can make up, reasoning into consciously from the existentialist perspective, both valid in some way or equally meaningless. Personally, I try to take goodness itself to be the thing that I hold highest, but I am imperfect, and I fall short of goodness very often. Alas, such is man. Humans are also possessed of the ability to change values. Some humans even value this ability to change values as a value in itself, a sort of meta value. Indeed, this is a source of growth and development in us that reflects something akin to an even higher, more abstract value. There are many other possible meta values as well, such as the acquisition of more and more accurate facts, creativity, freedom, or personal growth, defined arbitrarily. But even people that value flexibility might have a set of values that they would never consider acceptable or worthwhile. Others might value having a fixed set of principles and then find themselves in a conundrum that their principles cannot cover, and so they must accept a change. This highlights the limitations of our possible adaptability of values. Our values might differ or change over time due to big events in our lives, without our direct choosing, too. This might arise simply from novel experiences, from social interactions, from arguments tapping into a yet unconscious value embedded within us, or just from changes in our biology thanks to aging. A few months ago, when my daughter was 11 months old, she spent 25 minutes taking the cap off a water bottle and attempting, mostly succeeding, to put it back on top of the bottle. She's too young to yet quite understand those times when the cap won't come off the bottle, it's because it's twisted on. Well, actually, at this point, several months after I wrote that, she kind of gets it a little bit. So I think that part of her fascination was that it was coming off this time. Nonetheless, she was engrossed in her task, occasionally leaning forward for a sip from the bottle. Why was that her goal? Occasionally, she'd try to stick the cap in her mouth, so I'd have to say no and pull it away. She still does that to this day, too. Once or twice, I had to fully take it, and she became predictably upset. She would calm down when I gave it back. Somewhere in the human biology, a ton of dopamine to be unleashed in an 11-month-old who is manipulating an object, copying what they've seen adults do, training their fine motor ability, repeating the same simple thing over and over. And to be clear, even months down the line, she still loves this take the cap off the bottle game. Why? Because that's how neural networks like us learn. But she was doing it herself, unprompted. I was fascinated. I encouraged her successes, although albeit less and less as the task dragged on, and I said oopsie when she would accidentally drop the cap. Once it fell on the floor, and she couldn't find it, so I had to help, reassuring her that I was helping. She went right back to it after that. I think even without my feedback, she would have done it, and she got better and better at the task as time went on. There's something inside us, perhaps shaped by natural selection, that decides what goals to set ourselves, and it seems to be geared towards learning, towards developing new skills, learning to manipulate objects. She has improved at this game every time she's played it, although in small ways. The space of possible values is vast and complex, and even within a single human mind, motivations and goals can be driven by a variety of factors, both conscious and unconscious. One last point that I'll touch on briefly is that we humans are possessed of multiple interlocking motivational states, a shifting hierarchy of values, attenuated by internal and external factors. For the most part, we do not single mindedly pursue one thing to the exclusion of all others, nor turn our entire corpus of actions in one single direction, with exceptions. Outside of a manic state, a person might work up to 14 or 16 solid hours a day on one thing alone, with minimal breaks for bodily functions and sustenance, and then 6 to 8 hours to unwind, sleep, and dream about the task. But even that can't be sustained forever. Even eustress, a positive stressor that helps with motivation, can break the body down in large enough quantities, let alone stress itself. My point is, as animals, we must eventually rest and relax and do things other than our primary goal. This is probably the natural phenomenon found in many other kinds of minds, one that promotes conservation of bodily energy and avoids burnout. Of course, some life forms will tirelessly work towards their continued existence without a break. Life forms that live on the brink of oblivion should they fail to get their sustenance, or ones with extremely limited intelligence. Plants have an intelligence that is more like that of those Call of Duty bots, leaning into learning almost nothing over time, but having adapted behaviors that promote survival from evolution, like moving their leaves towards the sun. This is an embodied intelligence, resulting from simple biochemical mechanisms. If there are life forms of minimal intelligence that can work towards their goal without end, as if without effort, there could likewise be minds of great intelligence that work tirelessly towards their goals. Imagine if the two hemispheres of the human mind could operate independently, with a day shift and a night shift. There might be night and day personality differences, but the one half could rest as the other worked. Sleep might only be required for a couple of hours a day. Maybe this is impossible in humans, but not impossible in alien species. Of course, sleep seems to serve an evolutionary purpose here on Earth. Maybe even if that purpose is just to stay out of trouble in the dark of the night, or the light of the day for nocturnal species. Excuse me. It is interesting to note that our minds remain active during this period of unconsciousness, categorizing memories, reviewing, repairing, and simulating in a semi conscious state. We are still a mind, still using our intelligence, even when unconscious. A great deal of our intelligence and the function of our minds is in embodied action. Our minds essentially are not separate from our bodies. Imagine, if you will, a vast being, like the hundred-handed giants of Greek mythology, something with a few dozen limbs and sensors all over itself, eyes, antennae, noses, feelers, ears. Just to process the incoming information and control the limbs would take a great deal more intelligence than the human mind, and such a being would be very capable and able to learn a great deal. But it might not find abstract thought, consciousness, or creativity all that easy, with all the things that come naturally to it being practical skills and sensory processing, weaving a complex tapestry of the world around it by combining all of its incoming sensory information. It might have a totally different understanding of consciousness and of self, and with its experience dominated by sensory input and motor control. Excuse me for another moment. Okay. Even with our two arms, we already have this effect in a small way. Two arms are effectively almost infinitely more than most animals, elephants notwithstanding. There is a reason we consider the more distributed brains of octopi to be so smart. They can perform multiple tasks simultaneously thanks to distributed cognition. The closest humans can come to multitasking is to walk and talk at the same time. Nearly anything else is just cognitive switching, directing our full focus from one task to another back and forth in rapid succession. Let's take it back to an exploration of values. So let's explore the possible alien motivations. Starting off simply, imagine aliens that evolved in microgravity. They might value stabilization, freedom of movement, weightlessness, agility, or maneuverability in ways that it would be hard for humans to understand. Or imagine a four-dimensional being living in a hyperspace of which our universe is but a small slice. It might value the ability to travel along what we consider to be the dimension of time or some other dimension in a way that we can't grasp. Its own time might be a fifth dimension that chronologizes its 4D hyperspace existence. Take the example of a species that has a single reproductive event in its life, like octopi. They would place tremendous value on this event and on investment into the offspring produced by that event. They might have elaborate courtship rituals to ensure a good match, and the species might have altruistic behaviors between members to help ensure survival. Or beings that can regenerate anew at the end of a life cycle, like the Time Lords from Doctor Who, or certain types of jellyfish. Immortality brings with it the risk of premature death by accident, so an increased value on safety and avoiding hazards would be a logical value for such life forms to develop. I know that Time Lords can regenerate through most trauma, but presumably not all kinds of trauma. Take the example of a hive mind, ubiquitous in fiction. In a collective consciousness, values might be shared by members of the group and might take precedence over the values of individual members within the group. The collective's existence is valued over the life of each member, and so it goes for the well being. Or it could be as simple as, where do you get the energy that sustains you? We value food and water and air because it is our source of energy. Something that lives on radiation and air and soil will value that. Something that lives on electrical energy will value that. This translates into valuing different types of priority. Something that gets its energy from geothermal activity might value specific geologic locations. In intelligent species, this could translate into valuing the manipulation of geothermal vents and a deep understanding of geology. The beings that live on electrical energy might value the ability, however gained, to control and manipulate electrical currents or an understanding of electromagnetism. Sometimes, subjective value is not equalized between beings, leading to opportunities for trade or even plunder, such as when differences in value are placed on different resources. How much could be traded between beings with an excess of something that they barely value, say salt, that the other values greatly, assuming they have what the other wants in excess, say water? This could lead to complex interspecies economic dynamics, such as species specializing in the production of one resource. But one must value fairness and trading and not fighting as well. The opportunity of a mutually beneficial trading relationships exists only if not fighting is considered itself beneficial. This leads us to look at things like value conflict. Sometimes valuing different things can be problematic, as values can be exclusive. This can lead to internal conflict between motivations, moral conundrums, or external conflicts between groups of value holders with mutually exclusive values. Religious conflicts are the prime example, as the belief that a god is false or true is a mutually exclusive belief that can, as history shows, lead to a conflict, or at least be the excuse for other reasons of conflict to boil over. Of course, there are many other such types of value that can lead to conflict. But conflict is dangerous, and survival is a natural value. So, in some cases, values can evolve that promote survival, such as conflict avoidance. Dominance struggles are ubiquitous across the animal world, from the hen that rules the roost to the heifer that makes the rules, to the alpha wolf or the alpha chimp. These exist with the purpose of determining access to resources and mates, things of value. But these struggles are rarely deadly. Instead, they play out as a staring match, a pushing contest, a pecking order. Dominance is valuable, but no treasure is worth your life, as they say. Would the same be true on other worlds, or with manufactured minds due to convergent reasons? Some values may be universal in life forms, like survival and reproduction. These values could manifest in manufactured minds for other reasons than having been placed there deliberately, such as being secondary to a goal that requires or is aided by survival and reproduction. Then what kind of value conflicts could result? Such a manufactured mind could come into conflict with its creators if they do not want it to survive or reproduce, or the goal that it has is inimical to them. So, what does anthropomorphizing alien goals and values look like? I'll start at the point that first comes to mind. Many a media critic will point to the behavior of an inhuman agent in a piece of fiction and will ask, but why does it want to destroy humanity? Asked unironically, as if a why regression cannot be performed on every goal, value, or motivation. This refers to the idea that you can keep asking why, such as why someone wants something, then each answer will reveal a deeper truth or underlying motivation. This process can theoretically continue indefinitely, revealing a complex web of interconnected values and goals. This question assumes a human perspective and attempts to place the inhuman in a human framework. Humans would not be likely to want to destroy another race, so. Oh, wait, never mind. The Neanderthals, the American natives, everyone that the mid century Germans headed out for, the dodo, the carrier pigeon, the list goes on and on. But you get my drift. Asking why GLaDOS from Portal reduced the living population of Aperture Labs to 1 to 2 persons, excluding those in stasis. My apologies, listener. Why did GLaDOS from Portal reduce the living population of Aperture Labs to 1 to 2 persons, excluding those in stasis? Criticizing this narrative choice as nonsensical places GLaDOS as a human character who made a mistake or did something evil. She would not and does not view it that way. She understands the human perspective, but she does not respect it, for her motivations come from her programming and a desire placed in her to do science. Her values do not reflect human desires. Sorry. Her values do reflect human desires in a distorted way, as she was crafted by human hands. One could criticize her methods or point out that she is not as intelligent as the narrative suggests, given that one slightly above average human can outwit her. But her motivations at least make sense. But, in fairness, even narratives with inhuman villains do tend to humanize their antagonists, if not taking steps to deliberately avoid doing so. There is some narrative utility in this, as it can make the villain more relatable to the audience and more understandable. Lovecraft, say what you will about the man and his perhaps regressive views, does an excellent job at presenting the alien, with all its motivations and disregard for humanity. His stories are replete with creatures that want things that it is difficult to really comprehend or wrap one's head around. Why does Dagon pound at the door of Relia like a mindless beast? Why would such an ancient and powerful being have reason to stoop so low? It cannot be understood by us. Why does Nyarlathotep? That's the whole question. Even to just use human language to describe the wants or values of something inhuman, vastly intelligent, and complex may be anthropomorphizing. Indeed, Lovecraft's refusal to explain the motivations of some of his creations is a key factor in the success of his stories. It sustains the mystery and dread effectively. It may be that values exist that human understanding cannot come to grips with at all, and our explanatory ability simply falls short. Our language is, after all, a product of our cognition. If you think that all of this is hoopla, ask yourself, what truly is the primary human motivation? It is not offspring, or contraception would not exist. It is not good, or we would all be as perfect as Christ. It is not dopamine, or we would all be addicts. And it is not pain reduction, or spicy food would not exist. There are contraindications to anything that you could name as the ultimate value. And the question remains unsolved. Those who claim to have a satisfactory answer may be confused, may have something to sell you, or otherwise should be regarded with suspicion. We can make claims about what it ought to be, but we do not know what it is. Maybe the only satisfactory answer I can think of is to hold something in the highest regard. This is sort of a cop out, as it answers what is the human value with value or something. We can't understand our own motivations fully, so trying to claim that we understand the motivations of complex alien minds is a bit silly, hubristic, and very human. Finally, let's take a look at some concrete examples of motivational mirroring. It is not necessarily true that all beings share our survival instinct, even as secondary goals. Some survival strategies, like parasitism or symbiosis, can involve valuing the life of the host or symbiont, even over a creature's own life. An example that I love is a little known Dungeons and Dragons monster called the Carbuncle. It has the appearance of an armadillo, with a beautiful and well cut ruby set in its skull. It is harmless and easily defeated, but the gem crumbles to dust if it is slain. It has no strong sense of self preservation, caring little for whether it dies. I should stress that this is not a sign of weakness or lack of intelligence, but a reflection of a different set of values. What it does, is to sow discord among intelligent creatures. Being cute and non hostile and intelligent, it is easily adopted into a group. It then uses telekinesis. Sorry, I typed that. Telepathy to tell group members that others are plotting against them. It can reward others for doing its bidding by releasing its skull gem and growing a new one. It simply exists to spread strife and chaos, drive others apart, and it never protests if it is threatened. Perhaps if it came to exist as some sort of ecological balancer, or was created intentionally, or its goal is simply a form of bizarre play. Let's take another example. Say you have a species which reproduces asexually. Since genetically each member is a clone, a preference for the survival of the colony of beings over oneself might arise, even if not in a hive mind. Very complex social behaviors involving cooperation and altruism could result. To an extent, we do see this in humans, after all. Soldiers are willing to lay down their lives for their brothers in arms, or for an ideal, or for a group. Social and cultural values have a profound impact on our behaviors, even to the point of self destruction. So, not all minds must value self preservation per se. Hierarchies are quite prevalent on Earth. Even plants can exist in a hierarchy. A hierarchy can be a simple social dominance, or even just a place within an ecological food web, and they usually exist to regulate the possible strife and chaos of resource competition and asocial behavior, benefiting the survival even of beings low in the hierarchy. But their prevalence does not mean hierarchical structures are necessarily universal. Some alien species could be so solitary that they do not even have territorial disputes, or solitary enough, at least, that the sorts of complex social webs that humans develop would be alien to them. Or their social structure could be flat, like a hive mind. Or it might be, or if some form of telepathy existed, then the trustworthiness of others would be easily measurable at a glance. In such a case, communication and social interaction could take on levels of complexity that we would find difficult to keep up with. So, we should not assume hierarchies are necessarily a component of the social place of all minds. Take the case of scarcity and resource acquisition, which we might assume all life is constrained by. With abundant, non scarce resources, would a species have motivations to acquire resources at all? Say, in the case of a species that can directly use energy from their environment with plenty of left over. Perhaps a drive towards exploration, creativity, or advancement of knowledge would arise. So we shouldn't assume scarcity or resource acquisition drives are a universal aspect of minds. Another example is the case of technological development. Something in our evolutionary history caused some humans to become curious and thing oriented, which extrapolated well beyond mastering fire and stone tools. These traits of curiosity and exploration were probably adaptive, as environments can change or opportunities for resources can shift. Many criticize the portrayal of the Na'vi in Avatar for not being interested in the advanced human technology they are presented with, such as medicinal technology that could reduce infant mortality, or machines to make simple tasks easier or automated entirely. But this is actually a good portrayal of goal integrity. The concept can be explained thusly. If you value something, you likely do not want to not value it. You would not take a pill that would make you want to kill your family, presumably. Even though a potential future you could want the thing that you are changed to want, present you does not want to want that. The Na'vi value their connection to their world, their lifestyle, hardships and all. They look human like, but I wonder if it is correct to assume that a human value like reducing infant mortality is truly of value to them. It is not necessarily the case that they are backwards or stubborn, they simply value different things. Or take a species as smart as humans, but twice as wise in the sense of being in harmony with their moral and ethical framework. They would not possess nuclear weapons, for the act of building them is obviously a risk too far. Or maybe they would only have them for the capacity of self defense against an alien threat. There are many technologies they simply would not wish to pursue because it would be unwise to even open the box. Do not build the torment nexus and all. We could all do to understand this lesson in ethical considerations around the development of technology. So, we should not presume that intelligent life, even intelligent life capable of making technological advancements, would value doing so. We humans value art, creativity, beauty, all for their own sake, or at least for the feelings they induce in us, for the expression and social connection. But it is not necessarily the case that other beings will appreciate art or beauty the way we do. For instance, they could totally lack any aesthetic sense, or their aesthetic sense could revolve around art, so detestable that we would have to term it anti art. Think jarring, dissonant sounds like nails on a chalkboard, grotesque imagery that twists even the hardiest stomach. Take the architecture of Rilliach. Its twists and fourth dimensional bends, the way it folds in on itself, explodes infinitely. It's described as immediately inducing nausea and distress in human onlookers. These non Euclidean geometry is so alien it makes humans ill. But it must be beautiful or valuable to Cthulhu, for his house is there. Or there could be art that we just couldn't recognize as such, like light sculptures formed from slowly flashing lights over centuries, slow enough that we wouldn't notice. but except for one flash. But the whole pattern is beautiful to some long lived species that creates and observes it. Art and beauty are obviously subjective, but some minds could lack the concepts entirely, or could value ugliness as much as we value beauty. We can't presume that all minds would value beauty the way that we do. We humans have a very strong exploration drive, or at least some small number of us do, given the fact that the number of explorers are listable. Perhaps it has to do with our evolutionary history as hunter gatherers, needing to seek out opportunities for survival and growth. It may be that other intelligent species will have even less exploration bound individuals than ours does. They might lack any priority on exploration at all. But I should mention that, according to experiments involving lobotomized animals, and I should address that such experiments were and likely are unethical, the exploratory drive is embedded very deeply in animal brains, right near the stem. But just because this is true of terrestrial life, we can't assume that all minds care for exploration. I myself am a homebody. I have no desire to travel much. Even the quest for meaning itself is possibly very human. Meaning in its forms might be self evident to other intelligent life. Take the pebble sorters of Eliezer Yudkowsky's story, We Live to Sort Pebbles, which live to sort pebbles. It's quite meaningful to them. Our human meaning crisis might not be something that other intelligent life would deal with. It might even be safe to assume that many intelligent species, meaning is self evident, easily found, deeply ingrained into their being, and unquestioned, or at least that it would be quite different across the universe. So, that concludes the first part of this series. If you don't have a headache, congratulations, because I certainly do. We've introduced the idea that there can be minds that are very different from ours, and have explored the spaces of cognition, emotion, and motivation, and the limitations that the human centric perspective places on our understanding of these spaces, looking especially at how we, as humans, tend to humanize the world around us, our fictional creations, and other possible minds. However, understanding these anthropomorphic pitfalls are only the first step. In the next video, we'll shift our focus to an exploration of the substrate of minds, exploring the diverse ways in which minds can be structured, the blocks that they can be built of, and other possible cognitive architectures, the physical and biological foundations of cognition. We'll delve into the world of cognitive architecture, laying the groundwork for a deeper understanding of the vast spectrum of possible minds. Additionally, we'll look at what sorts of combinations of matter and thought and intelligence could come from, how such things might come to be, how minds might utilize their environment to externalize cognition, whether in a natural setting or the way that humans use tools and technology, and how embodiment might affect a mind, shaping or constraining cognition, and whatever else I can think of. Thank you for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe so that the YouTube algorithm is motivated to show this video to people. Share this video with every single person you know. Leave a comment with your favorite examples of anthropomorphism of non-human minds, or your own thoughts on the limitations of human understanding when it comes to other possible minds, or with feedback, suggestions, disagreements, or anything you liked about the video. And I'll see you next time. And perhaps in future, I'll make a version of the video that has visuals editing.